Alrighty. The finger syndicates have been ever present throughout Project Moon's works, especially so in Library of Ruina. The 5 make up the most powerful syndicates in the city, and all of them have some kind of whack-ass creed that is represented by their respective finger. The thumb prides itself in authority. Without a thumb, we wouldn't be able to grip things and thus climb any kind of hierarchy in nature. The index offers direction. Through their prescripts, they point their charges towards brighter and better pastures. The middle is for flipping people off, but as it is in the center, prides family and bonds, though those bonds often mean doling out vengeance when slighted instead. They're a relentless bunch. As for the ring, okay, let's not make any mistake, the ring is what this video is about, so I'm gonna give my whole ass interpretation on them, followed by whatever the bloody hell Project Moon has cooked up. The ring finger is often used to symbolize promises or romance. Commitments, if you will. What's particularly funny to me is that the concept of needlessly flashy combos, grand impossible strategies, and dreamy wins in spectacular fashion is often referred to in Japanese as roman, short for romance, to boot. Essentially an overcommitment to the bits made by someone who may as well be dreaming. To that end, the ring is seen as the creative finger, and also the one finger that gets to be accessorized the most. Project Moon's take on the ring is thus a bunch of murderous artists that follow an almost academia-style hierarchy. They wear almost exclusively white, letting their work stain their clothing as a sign of the artistic process. Well, that, and they operate like any other protection-based gang, just with their own little quirks. Whereas the index expects protection to be paid for in the completion of prescripts no matter how esoteric or insane, the ring expects you to have some artistic talent to get by. To stay under the ring's protection as an average citizen in the city, at least where the ring operates, say District 22 prior to the events of Leviathan, you'd have to periodically submit artwork for grading by dedicated ring students. So long as your art passes muster, then you are kept under the ring's protection. If you somehow impress upon them enough or drown yourself in the arts, perhaps you may find membership yourself this way or another. Now if you fail once, it's just a warning. Slap on the wrist. Don't do that again. You get the gist of it. Twice and your protection is revoked. All the little syndicates and upstarts can start raining on your parade. Finally, if you live to see a third failure, well, they'll execute you then and there for your skill issue. Now, similar to the protected citizens, the members also need to continue producing art in order to retain their membership. Lower-ranking students and docents are beholden to assignments from the maestros, lest they be turned into art themselves. As for maestros themselves, well, at the point of obsession they lie at, they're doing it for the love of the art at that stage. Speaking of which, what do those free ranks mean? If you've ever attended university, these similarities will pop out at you right away. The students are run-of-the-mill artists that study the arts of their respective school and submit works to maestros for evaluation. Docents, on the other hand, are like your student teachers, the fellow running your tutorial or the teacher's pet that occasionally runs lessons for you. Functionally, within the ring, they help with exhibitions, galleries, and other events. Regardless, they're standout students that have more to their name. As for maestros, these are the exemplars of the ring's schools, the best they have to offer, and have all submitted several masterpieces in order to get their rank. According to Hongers, this should be 3 pieces as exposited through his triple coiled ring. That said, the number of coils does indeed represent your rank within the syndicates. A single for students, 2 for a docent, and 3 for maestro makes sense at least. Anyhow, maestros hand out assignments and run the schools for the most part. Beyond there, we aren't exactly privy to ranks beyond, so perhaps it's just a rotating faculty of sorts loosely knitted together by their special interests. Speaking of which, what are those special interests? The ones we know of are mainly thanks to Ring Outis and a bunch of offhand remarks from Ring Hongers. Let me make use of this arts degree somehow, you know. Though this wasn't my field of study, that would be writing and games. Pointillism. This is a form of art that focuses around dots. Like a stupid number of dots. Actually, rather, entire paintings are usually just dots and small strokes. One of my cousins got really into this at some point, and his artwork is on the wall at my folks' place somewhere. Pointillism was part of the latter end of Impressionism's counter-movement, also coined as Neo-Impressionism, and mostly associated with one Georges Seurat and his student Paul Signac. I'll put some of their works on screen, but essentially the idea behind it was to utilize dots and small strokes for an odd visual blend when viewed from a distance. Some reckoned it was more of a science than art, but the main idea seems to be blending a partial optical illusion into the works. By utilizing dots of pure color instead of blending and mixing paints traditionally, they could exploit the way eyes blend color from a distance for a more striking result. At least that's the idea. As for Project Moon's counterparts, well, we've got the Maestro from Leviathan in Jumsun, and of course our two older ring IDs in Yisung and Outis, both of which being students. In their portrayal as a ring school, they're essentially murder painters with huge brushes for weapons. Their paints and materials can make use of people, the living and the dead both, as seen in Leviathan. The kit we get from the ring IDs is pretty much rainbow negative status spam with a focus on bleed, albeit the focus on bleed more so came as a need to nerf Yisung in comparison. Functionally, he was the status boogeyman. Arguably, he still is, just due to how stupid relevant he always manages to be. Corporism. This one is the most offensive by far and not really based on much in real life. It's an obsession with corpses and using them as a canvas for art, whether it be single bodies or multiple bodies stitched together. Organs, veins, bones, viscera, and all manner of other body parts are used in putting together sculptures and works. While allegedly there are modern day counterparts to this, which are made to evoke fear and disgust, it's not exactly a movement, so to speak. As for within the city, Corporism seems to be considered rather lowbrow, or at least not so inventive. Callisto seems to be something of a disgraced maestro for that reason, rather the lack of a creative spark beyond what repetition they were already doing. I've seen one fella posit something jank on the subreddit though. Death and gore is already too commonplace in the city to begin with, compared to the real world where this level of gore would be considered horrific and terrifying. Anything that the corporists could make in the city may just seem too mundane for the average city folk who sees death and despair every day. I can't imagine too many would want to go for corporist exams either for protection. You would after all have to source the corpses yourself. Anyhow, the two known corporists we have currently are Albina and Callisto, a maestro and their apprentice. Running into a maestro alone is already cause for plenty of screaming, considering what Jumsun was shown to be capable of in Leviathan. The Callisto already had a lot going for him from the start. Albina seemed a rather unique take for an apprentice sort, and the relation between the two results in a rather charming duo of characters. Callisto, who wishes for his apprentice to find her own form of expression, and Albina, who wishes to do good by her nurse father, and thus try to replicate what they are able to. It's a quiet clash of ideals, but shows that the two had a very genuine connection, overplaying with corpses. Moving along though. Fauvism. Allegedly, Pointillism may have inspired Fauvism, at least so far as the striking colours go. At least this specific work on screen is cited as an in-between or inspiration behind the Fauvism movement. What is Fauvism then? Essentially, they were more rebels to the Impressionist movements, more akin to Pointillists. Rather than mixing colours or otherwise blending things together in a more subtle fashion, Fauvism more so involved using colours without mixing, aggressively applying bright and garish colours to canvas to depict their subjects. This came in the form of really strong brushstrokes and the abuse of complementary colours for a very striking, almost violent effect. The name Fauves was after all induced by a critic who saw the earlier works in an exhibition and called the painters Les Fauves, wild beasts, so to speak. Whether this was derogatory or seen as a compliment, the name stuck, and thus we have a short-lived artistic movement of bold strokes and bad tempers. As for the Project Moon counterparts, well, the release of two of them upcoming is what spurned on this video in the first place. We're getting both Musso as a student and Rodya as a docent. Both of them are lower ranked than Callisto, but it wasn't like they were just going to give us a primetime maestro off the rib. Their depictions are very animalistic, to say the least. Each of them bears some kind of bestial appendage and masks to boot. There's the striking use of complementary colours too in their skill effects, which is a really nice touch, all things considered. As for some of the more background details in the trailer, well, the school of Fauvism seems to actually just use animals to begin with. I'd imagine the bastardization here is to hunt down said animals, take their parts, and replace them in some bold or meaningful way. At least from what we see in the trailer, it looks to be a lot of bold colours as per Fauvism mixed with patchwork animal sculptures. We'll have far more clarification and details next week, I suppose, though I doubt I'll be making a follow-up for this video. Go see the pinned comment if anything needs to be corrected. Cubism. So, squares, right? Well, not exactly. More so the deconstruction of more traditional painting techniques in favor of expression through funky shapes and geometry. This is your weird-ass Picasso paintings and the stuff people like to joke as modern art. It often employs angular lines, geometric planes, compressed space, and non-naturalistic colors to express depth and form. I'll be honest, I really do not get this one, and still don't get it, really, after being hit over the head with it several times. While I get that it shows folds and textures and all manners of unusual consistencies that can be gleaned from breaking the rules, it's not for me, and I don't have the best explanation for it either. I'll flash some examples on screen nonetheless, but yeah, nothing that sparks joy for me here compared to Pointillism and Fauvism really. Furthermore, in terms of Project Moon's mention of this school, it comes down to Outis' mention in her uptie story, calling them those who seek to incorporate abstract three-dimensionality and depth. Hongers further expands upon them being cold-blooded, perhaps alluding to them being more scientific in their approach to art compared to other schools. Suprematism. Finally, as of most recent mention, we're looking at Suprematists. This one is the cavalcade of geometric shapes layered around in the pursuit of pure feeling rather than depiction of real-life subjects. To this end, it is often comprised of simple shapes such as squares, crosses, and circles in order to color a blank canvas with emotions and spiritual depictions of concepts. Allegedly, some of the artists wanted to mess with non-Euclidean geometry too in order to create pieces that defy all logic. Anyhow, these fellows wanted to reduce art down to its most fundamental form and see how much they could strip away while still preserving meaning. This results in a lot of over-analysis of said pieces, even coming down to texture analysis on painted works. In some ways, this form of art can be seen as exceedingly pure. In others, a bloody shitpost. To me, this at least says something compared to minimalism. In terms of Project Moon's mention of the art form, it's even more passing than Outis, since it comes from Hongers instead through one of his voice lines. Pure-bloodedness is how he words it. With the above, I suppose this makes some modicum of sense, since it is essentially just pure shapes. It will actually be funny if we get some crazy ring fella that just throws 2D shapes at people. Like, imagine getting done in by a square to the face or a deluge of circles. You get the idea. Kinda wish we got some of these weirder schools because of the possibilities. Let me go over the notable ring fellas we've had run-ins with throughout Project Moon's works. Jumsun. This is the ring maestro featured in Leviathan. They are an androgynous dude with dots tattooed onto them. As a pointillist maestro, they are bloody terrifying, and it takes quite a lot of effort to finally put them down. They have a particular obsession with the mirror and worked in tandem with Aesir to research into identities and whatnots. They distort during their fight with Virgilius and make use of mirrors to predict Virgilius's actions. Ultimately, they're killed off by the Red Gaze, but not without leaving a few lasting legacies. Pablo is one of Jumsun's docents. We see them managing an exhibition, but otherwise accompanying Jumsun during the auction sequence. They're most obviously based on Pablo Picasso, even down to the funky Cubism stuff. When their mask is slashed off, there's an odd diffraction and smattering of space around them. Perhaps this is related to mirror tech, but otherwise my guess is more so the influence of Cubism. Since their fate is ultimately unknown, they may just pop back up at some point. Pop is a short king and is mostly seen carrying out their docent duties. They've got a sharp addiction to mirror tech, which ends up being their weakness. At least so far as letting Denver get the password to the ring's corridor. They're a very light reference to pop arts. I suppose a far later art movement, which a lot of you would likely at least recognize. I would have honestly laughed more at this if their name was Campbell, just because of the piece depicting far too many cans of Campbell's soup by Andy Warhol. It's like 32 fucking cans of soup or something, on separate canvases to boot. Asura is a docent we get quite a bit of combat with. At least we're shown them squaring off against Virgilius and putting up quite a solid fight. It's only by getting Goomba stomped into the abyss by 2 rings and a concentration of Shin are they finally dealt with. While it isn't a hard fight so to speak, it wasn't a trivial one either for the Red Gaze. There's no particular reference for this character, not that I could find at least. Regardless, they do manage to showcase how much of a fight a docent can put up. Considering we're getting a docent real soon, well, paints a very colourful picture. The Ufi Association director in Canto 6 is a former member of the Ring. It seems splitting off from the Ring isn't quite as fatal as, say, splitting off from the Index. Well, at least so far as this bunch didn't seem to be hunted down and killed off quite as readily. This bunch pretends to be part of the Ufi Association before revealing their true colors alongside Aesir in the basement of Wuthering Heights. They are ultimately wiped out by the Sinners, with Heathcliff brutally doing in their leader during their explanations. Albina is our first exposure to the Corporism school, and we initially see her as an Iron Maiden. While not strictly a ranked member of the Ring, she fulfills the role of apprentice for Nurse Father Callisto. She's the weird kid in the class that is trying her best to make friends, but otherwise is very off-putting. Her whole artistic claim to fame is fascia, that being her entire body shoved into a sword. Her brain, on the other hand, stays with her as Albina in the form of a whole body prosthetic. Through what we know, she feels more like a student, all things considered. Not that anyone is coming to see Callisto's exhibition, therefore not necessitating a docent at least. Anyhow, she ultimately meets her end at the hands of a certain Sinclair in rather spectacular fashion to boot. First, fascia is destroyed before Albina herself follows. The distress from seeing her sword destroyed is very real, and well, her disposal is rather sad really. Callisto is another maestro of the Ring. Their claim to fame is Tibia, the huge-ass bone blade he wields. Anyhow, seems his work may have not been considered enough to keep his rank, and thus he ended up dismissed to the House of Spiders in order to overlook Roshu's education. He's not the worst father, all things considered. He is genuinely invested in getting his newfound daughter to understand the art. It's just the choice of art is rather horrific in Corporism. Regardless, he takes it upon himself to make Roshu a sword or two in order to give her something to use besides the Arayashiki, but ultimately most of his advances are swatted away. Most of Callisto's impact on the story regards Hohenheim. Martin sacrifices himself to save Hohenheim when initially confronted with the Nurse Father. In return, Hohenheim makes it his life's mission to return the favor. Hohenheim manages to speak on his level in regards to Corporism and gets a surprise attack on the Maestro. This kinda goes to show that Gore and Viscera in the city really doesn't seem to go much further, and Corporism has its limits. In the end, a certain Sinclair finishes the job, calling his works trash before ending his life. All of that aside, the last notable connection to the Ring is the corridor. It's functionally a liminal space that lets them hide away with ease. Ring bases are connected through the corridor and are labyrinthine in nature. The technology functionally lets them make an exit from anywhere and thus create an entrance in that liminal space. The same tech is used with Mistopheles' back door, with plenty of shenanigans for the sinners to go through over there as well. Anyhow, that about wraps up the Ring and some of their bases. Let me know if you enjoy this kind of content by liking the video. If this video somehow gets 1,000 likes, I'll cover another syndicates or faction similar to this, I guess. If you want to see more content like this in the future, subscribe to the channel. Goes a long way in pushing the algorithm. Thanks once again to my patrons, Ardy and Derp. You can join them in getting shouted out on this slot below if you want to further support the channel. Next you'll see me is probably Monday night for the kit reveal. I'll likely be streaming some LobCorp prior to the kit reveals anyhow. Thanks for listening in, appreciate it.